Good afternoon from the training team here in Germany, and good morning and evening from those of you who are joining from other time zones. Thank you and welcome to today's session on key factors in successful community tourism product development. We are happy and excited to have today Kelly Galaski from the Planetera Foundation joining us as our expert presenter who's going to share with us her insights in community-based tourism. Before we get started, I have three things I would like to cover in terms of announcements and reminders for everyone. First, I will introduce myself and Training Aid, and then I have a few reminders for those of you who are new to Training Aid's live session. And then I will introduce Kelly and Planetera, our presenter, and then we can get started with our presentation. My name is Ayako Ezaki. I'm facilitating this session today. I am co-founder and managing partner at Training Aid, and I work in the areas of managing knowledge management and communications for Training Aid. That means I get to work with tourism industry experts and professionals around the world in developing our courses and other professional resources. And at Training Aid, we are an international e-learning company. We focus on skills building opportunities for tourism industry professionals. And our live sessions are part of what we do in providing content that we feel are practical and relevant to skills development needs for tourism industry professionals around the world. In addition to the live sessions, you can find on our website, trainingaid.org, information on our other courses, as well as also signing up to receive email updates on upcoming courses and events. In today's live session, I have a few things I would like to remind everyone. I see already that a lot of people have been sharing in our live chat feed where everyone is from. Hello and welcome. It's exciting to see a lot of people joining from different countries. So I think that many people have already figured out how to use the chat. You can, as you can see already in the chat window, you can type in and post your comments and questions. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested, if you would like to post something as a question to Kelly, you can, and when you're typing, you can see the little bubble icon on the left, and you can select a question, just so we see it, that somebody posted a question, and we'll try to address it either during the presentation or towards the end of this session when we have Q&A and discussion with Kelly. We've also received some questions through the sign-up form, and we'll do our best to address all the questions that we received either during or before the session. We might not get to all of them, but the session will be recorded and the video will be available to everyone who signed up, and you will receive an email reminder with a link to the replay video afterwards, so you don't need to worry about it. And one last reminder is that during this session, we'll be asking also you some questions so that we get to have a little bit more information about where you are, what you're doing, and what you think about this topic and what matters to you. So when we have the questions during the presentation segment, I will also remind you about it. And now on to our presenter, Kelly. Kelly Galaski is the Program and Operations Manager at the Planetera Foundation. Planetera is a non-profit organization established by G Adventures, and as many of you know, G Adventures is the largest independent small group adventure travel company in the world. And Planetera works with G Adventures and their destinations around the world, supporting local communities and social enterprise development. And I think that this is one of the aspects of what makes the model of the Planetera Foundation and their projects there exciting and successful, is that this model gives the strength to communities in terms of their connections to the global tourism value chain, which I think is also one of the key. Market access is one of the key topics that we'll be discussing today with Kelly. And I wanted to mention a little bit also that in the work that I've done professionally, I have been involved in many years in ecotourism and community-based tourism. And I think in the beginning, as I started to learn a little bit about the concept of ecotourism, I think that I got really excited about the possibilities and opportunities that this provides in maximizing the impact, minimizing the negative impact, and empowering communities. But I think that one of the other things that I've learned throughout my career is also that the ideals of ecotourism and community-based tourism in terms of benefits to communities are not enough unless you have good business practices. And there was a conference where both Kelly and I attended many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, where that was a big theme, and we talked about businesses and not projects, where we said community tourism and community development, in order to ensure the benefits for communities through tourism, we need business approaches to be successful. And I think that this is a key message that I throughout my career, I sort of carried along and want to continue to emphasize in what we do through training it as well. And at the conference, Kelly was also presenting on her experiences in community tourism and successful project examples. And since then, I think that there have been a lot of exciting developments that Kelly has been involved in, especially the one that we'll hear from Kelly today about the multi-year development program by the Inter-American Development Bank and GIA Ventures and Planetera. So without further ado, that is my introduction to Kelly and Planetera. And Kelly, maybe before you get started, you could also tell us a little bit more about you and your background and what you do in your work with Planetera.
Okay. So everyone can hear me. I see the microphone is working. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's great to be here. And so, yeah, Yako asked me about maybe a little story about myself. And one of the things I tell people about how I learned so much about community tourism is that I had to go through a failed process, in a sense, to really learn the ins and outs of it, and then learn from those mistakes. So I started out working in hotels for many years, and then I went back and did my master's in environmental studies with a focus on sustainable tourism development. And so for my research, I was working in a rural community in southwestern Costa Rica on the community tourism plan. And I followed all the steps in all the books and spent 6 months, and we did a lot of research and a lot of community organizing. And at the end, I was looking for where would the travelers come from. And I realized that it was very difficult to attract, especially international travelers, to a rural community that has some nice features, but maybe not something so unique. And being off of the main tourism route made it even more difficult. And so I started thinking, well, who might come? And we started looking at the domestic market. But I realized that after all the time and effort that the people were putting into doing this work alongside me, people from the community, that in the end it was disappointing to not see real results. And I said that I never wanted to make that mistake again. I didn't want to let people down. And so I've pretty much dedicated the last 8 years to working with communities to help find them opportunities and really bring results And the way I've been able to do that, of course, is by being part of Planetara and G Adventures. We're able to bring the market, which is G Adventures volume. Now, for some reason, my slides are not turning. It was fine earlier. One second. That's strange. I wonder if there's anything else, because we just tested it right before we started and it was fine.
Should I try and run from my screen, Kelly?
I don't know, because right now I see the title slide.
Yeah. Us too.
But when I hit the mouse or when I hit okay, it just brings up this menu above with all the settings of hide participants or show participants or. Let me see. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, here. Let me see. I got it.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
I had to click on PowerPoint again. Okay, sorry guys. So Ayako gave a good little intro about who we are. So basically, I won't tell you too many details in terms of what G Adventures does as a company, because I think everybody knows based on Ayako's introduction. But so because we do small group adventure travel, we've been taking people to communities, rural communities, for 25 years since G Adventures started. It really started on that premise of trying to bring people to experience the real culture of a place. And so starting back in 1990, bringing small groups into the Ecuadorian Amazon to stay with the local families, for example. And so this is a picture of a group of women who've been hosting our travelers in their village for 11 years now. And they're a group of women who have the traditional Incan weaving process, and they share that with our travelers, the traditional dyeing, weaving, and so on, that whole experience. But the people that are visiting are en route to Machu Picchu. And we realized after 7 years that the women themselves had never been to the most iconic site in their country. And so one year for Mother's Day, we took all 60 of the ladies by bus and by train as tourists to Machu Picchu so they could experience it. And it's just a little story I like to tell about the company. And yes, it's a for-profit company, and we have the nonprofit foundation, but we like to build relationships with the communities to be able to develop the community tourism product and experiences, and also to give back. And that's why Planetara was formally established in 2003 to do community development more formally. So in community tourism, we've identified the goal, right? That we know that the reason we want to do community tourism, apart from creating unique experiences, is to bring benefits to rural communities who've lacked access to other economic opportunities. So how do we get there? What we've learned and what we truly believe, and what I'm personally really passionate about, is that we have to find where the needs of the community and the private sector can coincide. And that's where we have a win-win. So before we move on, we want to know from you, which sector do you represent? So you can select from the poll that probably will appear shortly, which, if you're from a community, if you're from a destination, a government, NGO, private sector. And this is a picture here of some negotiations going on between a rural community in Peru, a very isolated community on the Lares Trek, which is the alternative route to Machu Picchu. It's alternative to the Inca Trail. And on the left-hand side, you have representatives of various tour operators. At the head of the table there, you have the local Planetara staff person, Joelle. And on the right-hand side, you have members of the Kunkani community. And they're discussing the development of a campsite on their lands. And it was an important and interesting process working side by side with the two sides and being the intermediary as Planetara, but it really resulted in the best case scenario where we have a community who has their campsite developed in the perfect location, providing the exact services for the tour operators that now use it. So over 30 tour operators now use it.
I just wanted to mention that most everyone has figured out, I think, before explaining. You can see at the top in the webinar window, there's a tab for polls, but we already see a lot of who has already answered. Sahia has mentioned that academic institutions are not one of the options. Apologies. And I see the live results here. It looks like many people, 38% of those who have answered this question are with the NGO sector, followed by the private sector, 29%, unless the numbers are still moving, and then 14% government, and then, oh, it changed. A little bit more, I think, on the NGO. And then destination and community, 9% or 10%. So it looks like we have a mixed group, which is great and interesting. And it also looks like there are a lot of people who are engaged in community tourism through the NGO perspective, which I think is also relevant because of Planetara's work as a nonprofit organization. Great. Thanks, everyone, for participating. And as we mentioned, we'll have a couple more questions throughout the presentation so we can share a little bit more with everyone who's participating. Luca mentioned that he's a researcher as well. Student, there are also some people who are in the academic side of things, educators, students, researchers, and definitely apologies for not having that option in the question. I think that I would also like to mention that those are an important part of the mix when it comes to community-based tourism development and tourism in general. So thanks everyone who are also joining today and representing the academic sector as well. So thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, what a great mix. Great to see all the different sides of the story, and everyone plays an important role actually in the development of successful community-based tourism. Collaboration is the key. So where do we focus our project development? Well, we've learned that where we have a high volume, where we can bring a lot of G-Adventures travelers, or where there's a volume from other companies as well, and where specifically where we have a lot of departures, so a lot of daily, weekly, or monthly groups going to an area, and where there's, within that area where there's communities with need, that's where we find the best Planetara opportunities, because we can have the most impact on the long-term basis. And our project types are really elements of the tourism supply chain. We think about what travelers need and what could be economic opportunities for the communities and work on those. And so meal projects, you'll see more about this one, another rural village in Peru, community owned and managed restaurant, This is one of our homestay hosts in Guatemala. So we do community lodges, homestays, and campsites. Souvenirs and handicrafts, of course, for obvious reasons. People want to take something home, and it's usually a very interesting experience to see how things are made. So we have a lot of those kinds of experiences. And then community tours and experiences, everything from food to coffee, working with community groups, or in this case, an at-risk youth training organization to develop tours. And transport's a new one for us. This is a group in New Delhi that trains women from vulnerable communities to become chauffeurs, and they take classes in everything from English to self-defense and CPR and so on, and they become taxi drivers. And it was created as a women-to-women service for the local market, and we worked with them to develop the service for tourism, and they are now our sole transport provider for airport transfers in Delhi. And we have about at least 2,000 women arriving to Delhi a year, and they pick up all of our passengers passing through there. So how's our model work? Really, the key thing here is that Planetera is the intermediary. We take all of our inputs in terms of product design and operations, where to invest in infrastructure and training needs to be able to get the community enterprises able to supply G Adventures and any other travel company. And we then partner with local NGOs, sometimes local governments as well, and institutions to do the project and community development work. And it's a constant process of getting feedback from G Adventures and making improvements and developing that product based on the market demand and market needs. And so what's the benefit for G Adventures as a for-profit company? Well, it's not a direct economic benefit in the sense that they're gaining money from developing these community enterprises. We're investing money in them, but we see it really as an investment in the future of the destinations. And also, of course, we're developing unique experiences for the travelers, and so it's a win-win on both sides. I'm going to show you a video that demonstrates some of these projects in action for a visual, and also some of the results of our partnership with the Multilateral Investment Fund of the Inter-American Development Bank.
In 2012, G Adventures and Planetera proposed a new way of developing community tourism to the Inter-American Development Bank's Multilateral Investment Fund. The IDB and MIF were eager to address the number of failed community tourism projects and were looking for a new model for effective community tourism. Through strong core values and a purpose-driven business model, G Adventures showed it was more than just a private company. We were a social enterprise ready for the task. For the first time, an international development bank granted funds for a community tourism project to be implemented by a travel company. 2 years later, 5 profitable community tourism projects are up and running, each one now included in one of 36 G Adventures travel itineraries. As a result, over 27,000 travelers are on track to experience these projects annually, making them profitable within the first year, proving the model to be effective in delivering results. In Costa Rica, G Adventures visits to Mi Cafecito coffee tours have tripled revenue for them in just 1 year. In Guatemala, 17 families' homes were renovated to provide them more space to host our 1,500 travelers that visit Lake Atitlan each year. And in Nicaragua, the homestay program we helped develop has now doubled in size, expanding into a neighboring community, impacting more than 30 families. In Peru, the Lars Eco campsite is the first community-owned and managed campsite in the country, bringing significant economic benefits to a long isolated region. Also in Peru, the Parwa Community Restaurant in the Sacred Valley employs a staff of 15 and serves more than 50 travelers a day. It has been showcased by Peru's Ministry of Tourism as the most successful community tourism project in the country. And then there are the ripple effects. From our local initiatives, 50 new small businesses have spun off as micro-enterprises. G-Adventures and Planetera have always been about changing people's lives, and we will continue to be. We are proud of the financial success of these projects, and prouder still of what we've helped the people behind these projects accomplish.
Que ha sido una experiencia fundamental, nos ha ayudado a todas las familias.
Trabajar con G-Adventures es bueno porque tenemos un trabajo seguro.
Nos enorgullece saber de que una empresa de ese calibre pues mira y valora elementos locales.
Spreading opportunity, creating possibility. This is tourism's potential to change the world.
So just a little bit more about these, some of these projects. This one in Peru, essentially the infrastructure was simple, was just the bathrooms, showers, the terraces there for the tents, but the key thing was formalizing a campsite as a community business on the Lares Trek, because camping was formally done in an ad hoc way. Communities weren't benefiting. People would just camp on schoolyards or open land. And so when we worked with this Cuncani community to formalize a business with them, they now also received endorsement from the Director, the Director of Tourism for the region, and all tour operators that go through that area now must use the campsite. So they get 30 tour operators using their campsite. And we're hoping that it can be replicated by the government, because there's a lot of other communities in the region that are still receiving that kind of ad hoc camping, and this way a community can actually earn income in an area where there's absolutely no other economic opportunities aside from being porters. So the Parwa Community Restaurant that you saw in the video, this is the food. I just like to show a picture of that because we're very proud of what was accomplished there, and the women were trained on using the local ingredients to create this kind of fusion cuisine and serve 50 to 100 travelers a day. And they were really nervous at the beginning. They didn't really believe us that we would bring that kind of volume, and they tell lots of stories about how they had to learn how to carry the weight on the trays with rocks and so on, and they laugh about how nervous they were. And they're amazing professionals now, rotating different positions in the restaurant and then training other women in the community to take on new jobs and rotate positions. In the first year, they were able to bring in $160,000 in revenue, and one of the key things here is that so we spent about a year and a half working with them to develop their business. They have everyone on payroll, they pay taxes, they're a formal business, nonprofit. All the revenues have to be invested into social projects in the community, so they've already executed 3 of those projects, a computer lab and library for the children, a scholarship program for all of the children, and also a program for the elderly. So quite successful in the first year, and it was just opened March 2014, so they're now into their their second full year of operations. So what do you think, this is the next question now, what do you think the main reason is why some community-based tourism projects fail? So we'll go into all of the different success factors and lessons learned, but so we want to get an idea from everyone what people think is the main reason that oftentimes community-based tourism projects fail. So lack of infrastructure and skills, not engaging key stakeholder groups, or lack of connection to the market. Of course, there may be other factors, but these are ones that we thought you could choose from.
Yeah, and there's definitely no right answer I think we're looking for. I think sort of we wanted to ask everyone what they thought of from their experience, or maybe some of you have experiences in community-based tourism projects that have been successful or not successful. So we're interested in hearing. I think we're already seeing some answers coming in. Definitely, a lot of people have already said lack of connections to the market, and some have also selected the first two options: not engaging key stakeholder groups, lack of infrastructure and skills. Kelly, do you, from your experience, do you think that these are some of the considerations that community members have as they get started in being engaged in tourism? Do they consider that they have sort of these factors in terms of skills or engagement or market access? What do you think are their sort of expectations or awareness?
In terms of awareness, I find that people think of skills first and lack of skills, and so think about all the training needs they have, which of course are important.
Yeah.
But sometimes then they go out and they are able to get funding, whether it's from the government or donor, to build up those skills and even build up the infrastructure. But oftentimes before the market has been considered, and it may be a disconnection of what market would actually potentially visit them versus what market is visiting the country. So you take a country like Costa Rica, of course, it's extremely successful tourism industry, but it doesn't mean that all communities in the whole country are going to be attractive and are able to capture that market. So I think there's a bit of that disconnect. People focus a lot on the infrastructure needed and the skills needed and the standards required for tourism, but not necessarily actual demand-based considerations. Yeah. So this training was developed as part of the project with the Multilateral Investment Fund, and so we're taking the training module that was developed and adapted it to a live presentation. But essentially, it does contain some learning objectives to think about the key success factors, some lessons learned, and the most important factors in evaluating the viability of potential CBT product. So going right into the key success factors, the location of the enterprise or project, we have found that the proximity to the tourist route is vital for the commercialization of these products. So sometimes governments or donors will look to develop community tourism in an area because it may be depressed economically, but if it's 8 or 12 hours away from where the majority of the tourists are visiting the country, like this route in Nicaragua, for example, it's really, really difficult to attract international tourists if it's going to take several days when maybe they only have a week to spend in the country. And maybe they only have a couple of days to spend in the country because their tour is part of a longer journey through the region. So it's, I think really important that donors and people that are going to be working with communities on developing product really identify those market partners, potential buyers of the product first. And it may be difficult, but I think it's a real must. So for us, for the communities that we work with, one of the things that really helps them is that they have the link to the market, of course, but they're also included in the marketing. So they don't have to try and market directly to the international traveler. If their experience is included in one of our itineraries that is receiving a good volume of travelers, and we won't develop or engage with communities in areas where we can't guarantee a certain amount of volume, because then we feel like we won't be able to make them sustainable and have them bring in enough revenue to stay afloat. one of the things that has really helped the community enterprises that we've worked with is that they receive training directly from the tour operator. So it doesn't always mean that G Adventures staff, or in this case it's the head of operations, is actually in the community. Sometimes it's just through Planetara staff, but we work closely with G Adventures to determine what kinds of really practical hands-on training is required to start working. And sometimes the training is through practice, because through reservations, immediately blocking space for the upcoming year, those kinds of things give them practice to work with any other company. And we've had in some cases where the people that will be doing the accounting for the business will come into the office and learn directly from the accountants at G Adventures in the local office, for example, in this one in Cusco, on how to do the invoicing for their systems. And so just really learning it directly from the client how to do those things. And I know that's not going to be the case for everyone, but I do think that NGOs and other institutions can form stronger partnerships with the private sector to bring some of that real practical knowledge into the capacity building programs that they're providing. And so another success factor is definitely this collaboration. So between the local NGOs and G Adventures, and in some cases we've worked with also with the public sector, ministries of tourism and local governments, to get them involved if it's a bigger project with more infrastructure. But it's definitely that collaboration that enables the communities to learn from all sides and be supported. So just a quick summary of our key success factors is the close proximity to the tourist route, an established link to the market, training directly from the tour operator or other private sector partner, and the collaboration between the private sector and the other institutions. So moving into lessons learned, we found that feedback from tour guides is essential. So developing a product, a community tourism product, and then having it tested by some groups and guides, local guides, to get that feedback at the early stages and really customize the experience is essential. If I find a lot of community tourism or communities will develop 5-day circuits in their community or 4-hour experiences, and then you try and sell it to a tour operator, and it's like, well, we only have an hour and a half. Can they do anything in that time period? And then there's still a lot of adjustment, and I think if the community is open to having different types of products available for different types of markets and is able to adjust and also open to these kinds of shorter day experiences, you'll have a lot of more opportunities. And then training for business sustainability, and essentially what I mean by that is including the stuff that people generally don't really want to learn, like accounting, keeping books, inventories, doing business plans with people who are maybe just a microenterprise. It really is worth the time and effort to go to that level of projecting revenues, helping people understand their cost of goods so that they can price things properly and make sure that they're earning money and not losing, and then also being able to plan for their future. It makes for better partners and also enables them to work with other potential buyers. Another thing that we've learned that's really important in community tourism is that it's important to look for ways to develop opportunities with people that will not necessarily host tourists directly. So we've developed a lot of microenterprises that are related to the tourism supply chain, or that so for example, this group of women that does organic chocolate, it's near the coffee tour location, but about an hour away. It's too far, and logistically it doesn't fit into our tours, And so the chocolate is brought to the coffee tour gift shop and sold there. And in Peru, we developed several microenterprises to supply the restaurant. So because you saw with only 15 people working full-time, not everyone in the community can work there. And so we have a group of 9 women producing snacks from local products like quinoa and kiwicha and so on to sell to the same guests that are visiting the restaurant. For the Inca Trail, we have a group of 12 women producing medicinal herbal teas for the restaurant, and farmers like the man on the left, just really has home-based gardens. About 5 different families have gardens to produce vegetables and so on. So the options are really endless. We worked with a company to develop biodegradable soaps and detergents for G Adventures to purchase for the Inca Trail, and so we've really found that it's important to think about those other opportunities. And another thing that we found is really important is what I mean by treating the community as a business partner is not underestimating people and ensuring that they get the best training in how to run the business, and being brought up to speed as a true supplier. All of our community enterprises that we have developed or we've worked with are full suppliers for G Adventures with contracts, pricing negotiations every year. We may help them and intervene in terms of Planetera to give them some support and how to figure out those costs that are really important to get good pricing. But certainly by working with G Adventures as a supplier, they're able to work with any other company now. And lastly, but not leastly, the training. Sometimes we bring in, we as in the broader community, sometimes we'll bring in students or people from foreign organizations to do training, and even if they speak, for example, Spanish as a second language, the cost and the effectiveness of doing that we found is just not the same as hiring locally people with speaking the native languages. In Peru, of course, we need Quechua-speaking trainers for cooking, for accounting, for the lawyer, the architect who went to the community. Everyone had to speak Quechua. And in Guatemala as well, the Sutujil speaking capacity facilitators, those were so key in not only to deliver the content, but the commitment and their ability to stay longer term in the communities, we found was just invaluable. We wouldn't go back in terms of our approach. So just a quick summary. Feedback from tour guides is essential. Training for business sustainability is vital. Enterprises that do not host tourists directly are important and effective for spreading opportunities. Treating the community as a business partner yields the best results for everyone, and the local trainers are the most effective. So the last topic is evaluating the viability of a potential product. And there's really 6 key questions to ask yourself when you're trying to develop community-based tourism product. First and foremost, of course, is there a market? Who's currently visiting the project area or that part of the country? Who might visit in the future? What hotels are around? Is there a domestic market? The domestic market is often overlooked, and really that is the best place to start because it gives people practice. So if you have a really small burgeoning community tourism experience and you're close to a city center, if you can, or even the people that live nearby, if you can get people to start coming there, that's often how a lot of small businesses get started and going, and they get practice, and then they earn revenue, and then maybe eventually they can try and look to the international market. But it's really important to do an entire market research study before even deciding to develop the product. And of course, we touched on this before. Where is it located? Is it close to other attractions? Ask those harsh questions at the beginning before investing in community product. If it's just not going to be feasible to get to, it doesn't, there may be some other opportunity to supply the tourism industry instead of looking for tourists to come there. And is it fulfilling a need in the market? We see so much of the copycat phenomenon in rural communities around the world, and it's really important to be fulfilling a need. Like any business, first lesson in business development, what is the need that you're trying to fulfill? And if it's something that can be found easily in several other parts of the country or even in parts of the region, and that's not unique enough, it's going to be difficult to attract enough volume to sustain the business. And then some other things that are really important to think about. Is it too niche or too specific? Is it too expensive? So if it's too niche or specific, you may attract some people, but will it really be enough? Will you maybe get one group in a year? Is that enough? Is that even worth it? If it's too expensive or difficult to do or too far, of course that is related to the location aspect. And is it inconsistent? One of the things that the travel industry really needs is consistency more so of course for tour operators, because you're selling a product, it needs to have a certain level that you can depend on, that you're marketing, but also obviously with social media, the consistency and quality and security are important. And lastly, is it marketable? Is there a story to tell? Community tourism is all about the culture and the experience and the people that are delivering that experience. So finding out what those stories are, what the people want to share and what they don't want to share, and being able to tell the story of that particular place will really help with making the product more viable. So just a quick summary. If it's viable, if it has a market, it's fulfilling a need, it's conveniently located, it has a fair price, it's stable in quality and security, which obviously can be developed over time, and it's marketable. So, our last poll, which of these 6 factors do you think which of these 6 factors do you think presents the biggest challenge? So, take your time in selecting what you think out of these things are the real biggest challenges, and of course, depending on where you're coming from, if you're a community or NGO or academic, you may have a different opinion, so it'll be interesting to see what people think.
And Kelly, as we wait for everyone to answer the question, I wanted to ask, in terms of these 6 factors, in your experience working with communities, do you think that it's common that you often see a situation where a community already covers these conditions already? Is it common to find a community that fulfills these factors or a potential product? Or is it more of a process over time to support and improve on some of these factors?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of both. Certainly if we find an experience or a community enterprise that's already all of these, they've probably had someone helping them get there, especially with this in terms of the quality and the pricing and so on. Usually it's more of a process, but so if the things that really need to be there, I would say, is the location is really important. Yeah. And also, is it marketable in the sense, like, does it have that uniqueness and fulfilling a need? Does it have that? Is it a service that is actually needed in that area, for one? But is it also something that's unique and has that appeal and story? So those things are pretty essential to be there, and they're not necessarily things that can be really developed.
Right.
But the things about the pricing, of course, working with people to make sure they're making money, but also not pricing themselves out of the market, The quality, of course, is something that can be stabilized and developed over time. Security is another thing, of course, that is generally either there or not and can change over time.
Mm-hmm.
But certain elements of security can also be developed.
Improved over time.
Things like having lights on walkways in rural areas, or between houses, and locks on doors. Little things like that, of course, can always be improved upon.
And those changes usually depend on being able to work with local governments or the national level destination organizations?
I think it really depends on the size. I mean, if we're talking about a small community of 30 families providing homestays in their rural community, they would take care of those things themselves. In the case of the restaurant in Peru, which is a bigger undertaking, the municipality, we engaged with them early on to help provide some of the things that we needed for, like transporting heavy machinery and leveling the land, and then putting in the septic tank and all that, this infrastructure like that, of course. So it really depends on the level of the type of business that's being developed.
Okay. So we have, looking at the results, everyone's answers, it looks like quality and security, as well as having a market. These are the two answers that got most answers. Marketable, also the 6th point, that the product is marketable. A lot of people identify that as a challenge, and followed by fulfilling a need, and then conveniently located, 9%, which is a challenge that we mentioned. It's probably hard to work on if it's not conveniently located already.
Yeah.
And then a fair price.
Yeah,
interesting point, I think, about what different people from different perspectives think are important challenges, or the biggest challenges, and also your point about some of the really requirements that you need to have to make the decision when investing in community-based tourism development, as opposed to some of the factors that you have the opportunities over time to work on and improve. So, yeah. Thanks, everyone, again, for sharing your opinions.
So I think, just as a final thought to reiterate, I really believe that the partnerships between the private sector and the NGOs and local institutions can result in the most effective development of community tourism. So, I mean, yes, I do represent the private sector with the nonprofit built in, but I think that what I've been able to see in how the results have been delivered based on this ability to bring the volume, and I've seen so many community tourism projects or enterprises presented to us that have been developed down a path without that viability, or without that demand from the beginning, and they could be maybe developed just an hour off in an area that, if they had consulted with the private sector first, they may have developed it a little bit in a different way, or somewhere else. And sometimes you can adapt things, and we do that a lot. We customize. We find community tourism enterprises that have been developed previously, and we adjust them and customize them to our tours. But sometimes they're just in an area that doesn't work, or the type of product they've developed is just not in demand in that area. And so you see so many homestays developed, but maybe what's more needed in that area is a meal in a village, or an experience with handicrafts, or it's really important to look at what are those needs in the market in those areas, and then who is going to be coming. So I think it's really important for local governments and NGOs and institutions to get together with the private sector and just do some of that research and consulting with them before getting started on these projects that are really building expectations and really with the goal of bringing results to communities. I think it's important to do this, to incorporate the knowledge of the market into product designs and to really bring that sustainability to these projects for real benefits in the communities. And it really establishes more inclusive tourism in the region, because if you can look at opportunities that maybe not to host the tourists directly, but to develop microenterprises or small businesses to feed into the tourism supply chain, you're really expanding the opportunities. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. Ayako?
Sorry, I had myself muted.
Oh.
I was talking to myself. So I was just saying, without anyone being able to hear me, that I would love to go right into Q&A, if it's okay with you, Kelly.
Yeah, of course.
Because we have a few minutes and I wanted to address these questions that came in. The first question is, how do you cooperate with local or national tourist boards?
So it really depends on the destination and how big of the project it is. So from the G-Adventures perspective, the company cooperates a lot for marketing to co-promote the country. But from the Planetera side of things, we've engaged, like for example in Peru, with promoting the project and getting some support and looking at replicability. So it really just depends on the type of and the scale of the project.
Great, thank you. And the next question is specifically about the example of the Peru project. And earlier in your presentation, that brought $160,000 to the community in the first year from earlier in the video. How do they manage that sudden income responsibility and related decisions?
Yes. So from the very beginning, we worked with them on a community development plan. So looking at revenue projections, and of course that was revenue, not profit. So it was much less that came in in terms of the actual cash to use. They planned on a lot of investing back into the business. So a lot of the profits were used for that in the first year. But they already had this plan laid out of what were their priorities, and it's a multi-year plan, and every year is being revised. And because it's a nonprofit, there's not dividends to individuals, so it always has to be managed by the community association and spent on social projects and in reinvestment into the business. So it doesn't mean it's without complications, but it certainly minimizes that real danger of a massive cash influx.
And I just saw another question from Julie about whether you had any experience building a community-based destination management organization locally, and that might be similar to, would you say, to an association that you work with communities to establish?
Yeah, so on a micro level, like the organizations that run the restaurant and the campsite in Peru, they're community associations, and they're managing tourism in their community. So they're on a small level, they would be like a destination management organization.
Right.
In Galapagos, we're actually working with all the residents of the Floriana Island to develop their community tour operator, which is also is essentially their destination management organization. So the different families are different members, and they've selected their president, vice president, and so on, general manager of the business. So we're working on how that with Waponi, which is Jasivan Carvalho's organization in Ecuador, developing the management structure and so on.
Okay. That's a good example. If I would just to mention to everyone, we are running out of time, and I would like to address, if it's okay with you, Kelly, if you could stay on for a couple more minutes, address a couple more questions. But if anybody, of course, needs to leave, I understand it. We would like to respect your time. So thank you for joining. And as I mentioned earlier, the recording is available, and we look forward to having you in our next sessions as well. You can see on the screen right now our contact details, social links, as well as links to Training is Live Sessions page. And for anybody who is staying on, thanks for sticking around. We have a few more questions that I would love to address with you guys. A question from Carla is in the destinations that you work in, do you collaborate with local inbound tour operators, or do you work with established G Adventures companies, or do you establish G Adventures inbound operators?
A little bit of both. We work with many thousands of service providers around the world, and in many of the destinations, we have very close supplier relationships with inbound tour operators who manage all of our tours. And then in a couple of the larger destinations where we have G Adventures offices, we manage tour operations locally. But in the majority of cases, we work with local inbound tour operators.
Okay, and I think this is a related question that came from Marina. And I think this is exactly the area that you work in, Kelly, in product development for community-based tourism offers. How does G Adventures select the community-based tourism products to be included?
Right, so that's my job, and I work closely with our product development team at G Adventures. We do research beforehand in the destinations, so this is why I always harp on the market being the market demand and the location being so important. We look at where in our tours it would be most beneficial for the experience to have a community tourism experience, and where we have the volume to support a community enterprise, or at least to have a regular visits. And so based on the exact locations, there may be 2 or 3 locations in a country. Then we research what exists already in terms of what kinds of community groups there may be trying to work on something or may have had funding already, and then we develop that. Then we decide which one would be the best in terms of the experience and how much maybe funding they might need and so on. And then we make our choices based on that, and also where maybe we can have the most impact.
And I think there's a follow-up question in terms of working with inbound operators. Is there a relationship of exclusivity that's established with operators?
For inbound operators?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're independent companies, so they're free to work with whoever they want. In some cases, there may be, in a lot of cases, there would be like priority reservations if there's companies that we help fund. So for the restaurant, for example, G Adventures gets priority reservations because we almost fill it every day for lunch, but they work with other tour operators at other time periods or in the same time period if there's space. But never like completely exclusive.
Yeah.
Unless there's a relationship developed for that purpose with a local supplier, and that's what they want to do because we can provide enough business.
Okay. I think that a lot of really interesting and important questions, and I hope that we can cover some of this in the remaining time that we have.
It's fine with me. I just have to vacate this room because other people are waiting for it, so I'm just moving space.
Okay,
so
thanks so much for staying. I would say maybe I will cover the questions that I see at this point. I think 3 or so that I would like to ask you. And one, I think this might be a really bigger discussion, but how do you, from Luca, how do you balance the dependency that can originate from your direct involvement in a specific community initiative?
Sorry, I need to read that. You mentioned that campsites have been used by different tour operators, so I guess products are not exclusive to G, but how can you balance the dependency that can originate from your direct involvement? So, I'm not really sure how to answer that. I guess products are not exclusive. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of communities that we work with that we do provide the bulk of the volume, and it is a fine balance, because what we're all vulnerable to in the tourism industry is things like disasters or changes in security levels and so on. And so that's really where we can see issues with dependency if there's no one coming. But if you are asking about whether we were to leave that certain area and that dependency, what we found is that because we work in areas where there's quite a high demand, and we are preparing the communities to work with a global tour operator. First of all, we haven't left anyone, but we found that there's more demand. Like, we're actually building further demand from other companies to work with those same organizations or communities. So if we were to leave for some reason, we are pretty confident that others would fill that demand. The only thing is, of course, with natural disasters and so on that are out of our control, tourism, being dependent on tourism, is always an issue.
Thanks. And I wanted to go back to this question about Planetera by Fa. Is Planetera attracting impact investors? If yes, what are their expectations? I think you touched on.
Yeah, so not impact investors in the formal sense of where they would receive a return on investment. Only so far we only get donations. So we haven't done. We've done community loan. G Adventures has done community loans, but we haven't taken donations from, or we haven't taken investments from people yet, and mainly that's because the businesses are not big enough. So it's more, we do really work on a micro level. That Peru restaurant is one of the bigger ones, but we work, a lot of our grants are $5,000-$10,000, and the return on a homestay, for example, it's just not, we haven't seen it to be feasible for doing investments yet.
And how does the process of receiving Planetera receiving donations work? Is it project-based?
Well, we do, no, it's general. So, so G Adventures covers all of our overhead. So any donations coming to Planetera as a separate nonprofit, tax exempt, we take donations, and they are 100% for the projects that we develop. And so people can donate on planetera.org, and it goes into like the cycle of new projects that we're developing. Mm-hmm. So right now we have a campaign called Planet Her, and we're raising money for women's projects. But in general, we're always raising money to develop new projects, because one of the things is that we don't fundraise in order to start a project. We kickstart the projects and the small businesses, and we get them into the G Adventures itineraries, and then people start visiting them, and they want to contribute to maybe to that project, but we say, like, your visit is the contribution. We don't need you to donate to them because you're buying a product from them or a service from them, and they're a business owner now. But what we need you to do is help people like them get something new started. And so we take donations for the development of new projects.
Great. And I think that this is a great last question for us to discuss from Caroline. what tips would you give to an individual who would like to work in the field of community-based tourism? Where is the best place to look for opportunities in this field?
Well, that's a good question. I think more and more travel companies are developing their own foundations and having more components like this in their tours. And so I actually think getting experience in a travel company or tour operator is really, really great experience because it helps you understand the logistics, the operations, the market. And so in that way, you can potentially be involved in community tourism. One of the things I didn't say earlier is that community tourism from the market perspective is not really its own separate thing. Like I have another question for Natalia. Why are tours that have sustainable tourism components difficult to identify? Well, we don't see it as a separate thing. We see it as part of the tour. So community tourism, the experience of a village tour or a meal or a homestay or something is one of the elements of a tour. It's not something that people are buying separately. So I would looking for travel companies that are culturally focused or adventure focused, that are visiting rural communities, and in that way you can get involved in community tourism. On the other side, of course, is working for NGOs that have a focus on developing community capacities, and having international experiences is really important. Obviously, second languages, third, fourth languages are important for being able to work in rural communities.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to sort of some of the main points of your presentation today about, working different sectors playing different roles in making sure that community-based tourism works and is successful. And I think that the key takeaway for all of us, it is one of the key takeaways is the importance of working with and really understanding the private sector perspective, which I think sometimes is the reason why community projects may not be successful. And I wanted to mention also on the topic of skills and career development, maybe professional opportunities in this field. I do think that one of the best ways for all of us to develop our skills in the field of community-based tourism, but tourism in general, is to learn from those people who are experts and have experiences in the areas that we want to work in, and as we were doing today, to learn from you, Kelly, based on your experience, many years of experience implementing community-based tourism, and that's what we going back to who we are and what we do. That's what we would like to continue to do at Training Aid. And as we close this session, I would love to remind everyone that we do these live sessions on a regular basis, and you will see on our site, you can see the upcoming sessions. We're working with our partners, Respond Eco, Tourism Tiger, and later in the summer, Wild Asia and Sustainability Leaders, and these are some of the experts and leading organizations that are implementing responsible tourism and sort of tourism business best practices, and we hope that these will also be an opportunity for many of you to learn what you're most interested in terms of your professional opportunities and career development in tourism. So with that, thank you so much, Kelly, first and foremost, for your presentation and for sticking around longer to answer all these questions. Thank you, everyone who joined live, and apologies for any questions that we might have missed. Feel free to get in touch with us. As you see on the screen, our contact information. My email, as you probably many of you already have, is ayako, AYAKO, @trainingaid.org. Everyone is welcome to get in touch with me for any questions about this session or future sessions. And I look forward to hearing from many of you, and I hope that many of you can also join some of our future live sessions. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. My pleasure. I'm just answering one final question to Marie.
Okay.
So I'm writing it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
The chat will. Okay, we can leave the chat on
Okay.
for a little bit.
All
Thanks
right.
so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.